Good evening, everybody. I'm Councillor Lynn Doherty, the leader of West Berkshire Council and chairman of the executive. Can I welcome you all to this meeting this evening? And can I take this opportunity to wish you all a happy new year? It's the first meeting of the executive since the new year. I know it doesn't feel so happy for many of us at the moment, given the current situation, but I am very confident that as the year progresses, things will get better. So I do wish everybody out there a safe and happy new year. I'm being supported at this meeting by the Deputy Leader, Councillor Graham Bridgman, and other members of the Executive are also present. They're all councillors. We have Councillor Steve Arderwater, Dominic Bowick, Hilary Cole, Ross McKinnon, Richard Sumner, Joe Stewart and Howard Wollaston. Members of the Shadow Executive and the leader of the Minority Green Party are also in attendance. These members are entitled to speak and ask questions when invited to do so by myself. Other members of council are also in attendance in the virtual waiting room and can ask questions on any item included on the agenda. They will do this by indicating electronically, and I will then invite them to be brought in from the virtual waiting room for their question to be answered. Members who are not on the executive are not able to vote on any of the agenda items. There are also a number of officers in attendance, and they include Nick Carter, our Chief Executive, and our Executive Directors, Sue Halliwell and Joseph Holmes, and Paul Coe, who is substituting for our Executive Director, Andy Sharp. Paul is our Service Director for Adult Social Care. And may I also take this opportunity to welcome Sue Halliwell as her first executive meeting, having only just recently joined us at the start of January. So welcome, Sue. Shiraz Sheikh will be the legal advisor to the meeting, and I am assisted by Stephen Clark, by Linda Pye, the clerk to the meeting, and by Stephen Chard, who will be acting as the Zoom host. I will now ask Linda Pye to give some reminders about the way we conduct council meetings via Zoom. Over to you, Linda.
Thank you, Leader. Members, standard Zoom reminders are now being shown on the screen.
They will be in a minute.
Will be.
Bear with us. Okay, we appear to be having some text. Oh, here we go.
Yeah. In addition to those points, please note that the raise hand button has been removed to the ribbon at the bottom of your screen. If it becomes necessary for any members to telephone into the meeting, you won't be able to signal to speak. So once everyone who has raised a Zoom hand has spoken, the leader will be asked to invite anyone who has telephoned in to speak in order. Any voting necessary will take place by a physical show of hands. If we need to adjourn the meeting at any point, the leader will adjourn and will advise the executive of the revised time and date of the meeting. If it is a short adjournment, you will be able to rejoin this Zoom meeting. Otherwise, a fresh appointment will be sent out. Do members have any questions about the way in which the meeting will be conducted before we proceed?
Okay, thank you, Linda. In which case we can move to item 1 on this evening's agenda, which is apologies. Do we have any apologies to note?
No apologies from members, but apology from Andy Sharp and Paul Coe is substituting.
Okay, thank you. In which case, let's move forward with item 2, which are the minutes from the previous meetings. They're on page 5 to 18 of your pack. Members, are you willing to accept the previous minutes as an accurate record of the meeting held on the 17th of September? In which case, I'm happy to propose those. And does that proposal find a seconder?
Happy to second, Leader.
and Councillor Bridgman will second those. Please can executive members, by raising their actual hand, if they agree that the minutes can be signed as a true and accurate record of the previous meeting.
Thank you, Leader. I declare that the minutes have been approved.
Thank you. My electronic signature will be added to the approved minutes. Item 3 on our agenda is declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest for this meeting?
We've not received any to date, Leader.
Okay, thank you very much. And therefore we can move straight forward to item 4 on this evening's agenda, which is public questions. First of all, are you waving a finger at me there, Councillor Dillon?
Yeah, well, Happy New Year to you, as we haven't spoken since New Year, and to everyone. Just on the public questions, my employer is mentioned in one of the public questions. Obviously not as a member of the executive, but just to make that aware for the public.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon, that's noted. I would first of all like to thank all the members of the public that have submitted questions for this evening's executive meeting, and welcome those of you able to be in attendance to hear the answers to your questions and ask a supplementary question if you have one. For those public questioners unable to join this meeting, I can confirm that you will receive a written response to your question, and these will be published on the Council's website within 5 clear working days of this meeting. Please note that in accordance with the new processes, you will not need to say, "I asked the question," standing in my name. Your question will appear on screen and will be answered by the relevant portfolio holder. You will then be given the opportunity to ask a supplementary question, but please do remember that this must be to clarify the response provided and not to introduce any new business. In accordance with paragraph 5.12.9 of the Constitution, where questioners have more than one question, only their first question will be answered. If, after all other questions have been asked and answered, and there is sufficient time, we will answer subsequent questions. Please note that the time limit for public questions is restricted to 30 minutes. And if your questions have not been answered in that time, you will receive a written response within 5 clear working days of the meeting. The responses given, either verbally at the meeting or in writing, will be published on the Council's website. So therefore, we can move forward with our first questions for this evening. Now, I understand that Mr. Graham Story has requested written responses to his questions C and D on the agenda. We can therefore move forward, and I'd like to invite Councillor Ross McKinnon to answer Mr. John Goatley's question A on our agenda this evening.
Leader, may I raise a point of order?
You may, Councillor Bowick.
It's really a question. I may be completely wrong in this, but I noticed that Councillor Abb's backdrop, it shows the West Berkshire logo on the West Berkshire wallpaper with a clear Liberal Democrat logo alongside, which suggests to me that, or could suggest to an observer, a watcher, not fully aware of the situation, that West Berkshire is somehow affiliation between the Liberal Democrats and West Berkshire. I may be completely wrong. I'd be very interested to hear from officers, though. I hope they can reassure me.
Thank you, Councillor Bowick. I do believe that backdrops are the subject of the briefing notes and guidance with regard to Zoom meetings. Stephen or Shiraz, do you have a view on that?
Yes, Leader. Sorry, I haven't got the briefing note in front of me, but we should have neutral West Berkshire branded or neutral backgrounds.
Okay. Councillor Abbs, can I ask you to remove your background, please?
Well, then happy to, Lead. I would like, obviously, I am a Liberal Democrat, and I'm a member of...
And Councillor Abbs, we're all members of different parties, and we don't advertise them at the executive meeting.
Unfortunately, that's not true. Your name says Councillor Doherty, Leader Con, Conservatives.
Councillor Abbs, would you like to remove your background, or we would...
I see no harm, and there's no possible misinterpretation. You're just wasting.
Councillor Abbs, my decision on this is final. I've asked you nicely. Could you please remove your background?
We're not. I can't do two things at once. If you pause, I will remove it. But you're just making a fuss about nothing.
That's your opinion. Can we please move on, please, with question A of the public questions?
Thank you, Leader, and good evening, Mr. Goatley. A full environmental impact assessment would normally be undertaken as part of any planning application. And until any submission is made in respect of the London Road Industrial Estate, this work is not a requirement. Now the Council has a new development brief setting out what might be commercially viable on the London Road Industrial Estate. The Council is in a position to consider in more detail redevelopment proposals. Those considerations will be informed in part by further investigative work, including environmental issues. Any future planning application on the London Road Industrial Estate will be, as a matter of course, accompanied by full and appropriate site assessments generally. Thanks.
Do you have a supplementary question, Mr. Goatley?
Yes, I do. Can you hear me?
We can do.
Good. Bit of trouble unmuting there. Sorry, just a quick one. Happy New Year to you, Mr. McKinnon, as well. I just note that last time round, when the development came up, the idea of a challenge to the development partner was labelled as medium risk to be mitigated by correct procedures and transparent process being followed to select the development partner. Can you give assurances that that's going to happen again? Because last time, going to happen properly this time rather, because last time it basically cost the taxpayer £1 million plus.
Mr. Goatley, I stand to be corrected by the chairman, but I don't believe that is relevant in any way to the question that you've asked. The original question that you've asked.
I would suggest that's introducing new information as well, Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you.
It's not really, because it's about the glass wall between...
Your question specifically talks about compliance with the regulation of 64 of the Town and Country Planning. Thank you, Mr. Goatley. I know you've got other questions through today, so I'm sure we'll hear more from you on that. Can we therefore move on to question B on our agenda this evening, which is Mr. Alan Pearce to Councillor McKinnon.
Thanks again, Leader, and good evening, Mr. Pearce, and Happy New Year to you. In accordance with Regulation 7 of the Town and Country Planning Environmental Impact Assessment Regulations 2011, the local planning authority was required to adopt a screening opinion as to whether the planning application for the creation of a new access from the A339 to the London Road Industrial Estate required an environmental impact assessment. The screening opinion concluded that an environmental impact assessment was not required, as firstly, the proposed developments, the new junction, was not considered to fall within Schedule 1 of the Environmental Impact Assessment Regulations. And secondly, the proposed development is not considered to fall within Section 10F of Schedule 2 of the Environmental Impact Assessment Regulations, as it comprises new roadworks which fall below the 1 hectare threshold noted in that schedule. I confess I did have to look those up. A copy of the local authority's screening opinion was placed on the planning register at the time of the application. Thanks.
Do you have a supplementary question, Mr. Pearce?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Happy New Year to you all. Yes, please, if you would. I'm a bit concerned that an environmental impact assessment hasn't been done because the London Road wasn't included in the outline of the planning application for the road junction. If it had, it would have triggered an environmental impact assessment. And the junction was going to have an impact on that land. So that land should have been included in the outline. So can you just give me some guidance on that?
Yeah.
So, sorry, the question is some guidance on the outline.
Well, why wasn't the London Road Industrial Estate included in the outline of the planning permission for the junction?
Thank you, Mr. Pearce, for the clarification.
I would just say that all appropriate steps were taken at the time of that of that work, and I can't give any more advice than that. I think I've answered the question already.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pearce. We can therefore move on to item E on our agenda, which is Councillor Vaughan Miller to Councillor Dominic Bowick. Councillor Bowick.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Miller. I'm very pleased to tell you that the budget for youth services and children's safeguarding services is 66% greater than it was in 2010. Then the budget was just short of £10,369,000, while in this financial year, the budget has been £17,179,000, which, as I said, is an increase of 66%, or 65.7% to be more exact. Over this period of time, our youth work provision has been moved to a targeted approach, with specific examples being the support of young carers, engaging with those who go missing, and promoting the participation and contributions of young people in the services they receive. Safeguarding services are extremely complex, and the national landscape has changed significantly over 10 years, driven by such factors as increased legislation and regulation and higher societal expectations. Newer risks, such as those posed by social media and greater understanding in certain subject areas, such as exploitation, require a great deal of attention and professionalism. More familiar forms of abuse, such as neglect and physical harm, continue to require a highly skilled and professional response. As expectations and accountability rise year on year, we as a council continue to demonstrate our commitment, both financially and professionally, to achieving the best outcomes for children and young people. Our Children and Family Service has delivered consistently high performance in safeguarding. There is a commitment to partnership working and to having an influence across the region. The service has embraced opportunities for innovation and best practice, most recently evidenced by the Government What Works Centre report and the outcomes achieved in West Berkshire by the family safeguarding model approach. This way of working has enabled children and families in West Berkshire to receive timely, multi-agency responses to need, which reduces the likelihood of more intense, disruptive and costly intervention at a later stage. As a result, we are not experiencing some of the service demands and challenges presenting in other areas. This conclusion was confirmed by a local government association peer review of children and family services in December last year. The reviewers found strong evidence of effective practice and highlighted opportunities for West Berkshire to drive collaborative working further with statutory partners. Earlier in the year, the Youth Justice Board inspected our youth offending team and rated it an outstanding service. The service was able to show innovative programs for young people, such as the drug diversion scheme, as well as strong examples of multi-agency partnership working to prevent offending and reoffending.
Do you have a supplementary question, Councillor Vaughan?
Not at this point, thank you very much.
Thank you. We can therefore move on to item H, or question H, apologies, which is Mr. Paul Morgan to Councillor Ross McKinnon.
Apologies, Leader, just getting the details. Thank you for your question, Mr. Morgan. Good evening, and I hope you're well. The steering group is now convened as a project board, which aims to meet monthly. The members of that board are as follows. There's myself, the portfolio holder for Finance and Economic Development, Councillor Howard Williston, the portfolio holder for Public Health and Community Wellbeing, Leisure and Culture, and Councillor Richard Sumner, the portfolio holder for Transport and Countryside. Those are the three members on the board. Officers comprise Nick Carter, the Council's Chief Executive, Joseph Holmes, the Executive Director of Resources, who chairs the project board, Shiraz Sheikh, the Legal Services Manager, Gabrielle Mancini, the Economic Development Manager, Martin Dunscombe, the Communications Manager, Bill Bagnall, the Manager of Special Projects, and Rachel Brown, the PA to the Chief Executive and Clerk to the board. In December, a report was published to the executive setting out an indicative programme with accompanying actions and milestones in order to bring forward regeneration on the estate. The project board membership may be added to for periods, depending on the actions next chosen to progress matters, thereby ensuring appropriate representation at key points in the process. However, at all times, the objectives of the board, however represented at the time, will be to deliver the ambitions set out in the December report to the executive. Thank you.
Do you have a supplementary question, Mr. Morgan?
Yes, I do. Can you hear me okay?
We can do, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Just very briefly, I'm keen to get on to the questions about the football ground, so I'll keep it very brief. But in terms of the proper representation, I notice there's no councillors representing the Newbury town wards or no councillors representing the opposition. So in terms of proper representation and democracy, can I ask you to reconsider the current makeup of this board and actually put someone who represents Newbury town and also an opposition member on that board, please?
Thanks, Mr. Morgan. That's an interesting question. The three members who sit on the boards, we may not represent wards in Newbury, but we are all members of West Berkshire Council and have the best interests of Newbury at heart. So we've been chosen and selected really because of the portfolios we have and the particular experience and skills that we bring. And I'm confident that we can deliver for the residents of Newbury and indeed West Berkshire widely, who will also be using the facility. In terms of opposition representation, it has been widely publicised that until very recently there was an opposition member on the board. For reasons that I won't go into right now. I consider that to be inappropriate going forward. Thanks, Mr. Morgan.
Thank you both. Can we move therefore to item K on our agenda, which is Mr. John Stewart to Councillor Howard Wollaston? Councillor Wollaston? Councillor Wollaston, you're on mute.
I do apologise. I thought I had unmuted myself. Mr. Stewart, thank you for your question. This funding has been identified for the replacement of the existing artificial hockey pitch at Hennick-Worthy, for the potential provision of an additional training multi-use pitch in partnership with the hockey club. This project, led by the hockey club, has not progressed beyond initial consultation with users and the Hennick Joint Management Committee. Therefore, there is no firm timescale and a business case is yet to be finalised.
Do you have a supplementary, Mr. Stewart?
No, actually, no, thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. We can therefore move on to item M on our agenda this evening, which is Mr. Lee McDougall, again to Councillor Howard Wollaston.
I now clearly am unmuted. Yes. My apologies again. Thank you for your question, Mr. McDougall. The report on this evening's executive agenda is focused on the negotiations between the council and the rugby club. All those relevant parties involved in the preparation and sign-off of the playing pitch strategy will be involved in the process to ensure the council delivers against its stated position of delivering more playing pitches. I can confirm, however, that Sports England, the Football Association and the Rugby Football Union are all aware of the plans and in principle supportive, subject to seeing the detail.
Do you have a supplementary, Mr. McDougall?
Yes, I do. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Wollaston. So just to confirm then, you're saying that the Sports England, the RFU and the Football Association have seen these plans?
They've seen the principles of what we're proposing, yes.
It's a little bit vague. Have they seen the plans that you're proposing, or have they just seen a proposal that says we're going to do something? You're just trying to be specific.
I think Councillor Wollaston answered that they're supportive and they will need to have the detail behind that, but the conversations have been had.
But that's a no, not a yes, isn't it? So I'm not being awkward. I'm just trying to get clarity whether they've seen these plans or not.
Leader, I'm happy to clarify. They have not seen the plan.
Thank you.
They have not seen the plan, but they have seen what we're proposing and in terms of the facility.
Thank you. So they've not seen the plans. That's all the clarity I needed. Thank you very much.
We can therefore move on to question N on our agenda this evening, which is Mr. Jason Braidwood to Councillor McKinnon.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I'm not on mute. Good. Yes, hello, Mr. Braidwood. I am aware that Sport England suggests that 4 match equivalents is the maximum weekly capacity for most grass pitches. And as an estimate, junior players inflict about half as much damage to the pitch as adults. So that implies that 8 children's matches per week would be the capacity of the ground if it was used solely as a dedicated football pitch and solely for children. But as been said previously on many occasions, the council doesn't want any single dedicated user group to have exclusive control of the old pitch, be that via a short lease license or any other vehicle. Instead, the council wants the site to be available for general public recreational use, ensuring the widest user access until such a time as the land is required for redevelopment. And of course, we have a proposal before us later this evening, which will consider the future provision of a high quality sports pitch in Newbury. Thanks.
Do you have a supplementary, Mr. Braidwood? Stephen, is Mr. Braidwood in the room?
He is, yes.
Okay. Mr. Braidwood, if you're speaking, we can't hear you. I don't know if you're on mute. Okay, I think we better move.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Thank you, Mr. Braidwood.
Sorry, Leader. I basically just had it. I lost my Wi-Fi. Back on again now. So sorry.
Okay, no, that's fine. Carry on. Okay. Do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, I didn't hear Mr. McKinnon's response. Councillor McKinnon, I didn't hear the response, but it's okay. I've literally just come back. There was a supplementary because I think I probably guessed what you said. So yeah, I was just going to ask, before the pitch was closed to the past incumbents, there were at least 4 games per week and training on that pitch. I was just going to ask, with the current climate as it is, and with senior leagues and in particular youth leagues looking to extend their season due to COVID, would you not consider reopening the pitch for teams to fulfil their backlog of fixtures in order to help release the stress of fitness, health and well-being?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Braidwood, and yeah, I fully appreciate you had connection issues there, which is unfortunate. I addressed the 4 match equivalents point in my answer, as well as I suspect answering your supplementary, which is that the council doesn't want any dedicated user group to have control of the pitch via any vehicle. Instead, we want the widest possible access, not just football, but for other recreational use as well. But I do look forward to hearing a little bit later the proposal for the future provision of the high quality sports pitch in Newbury, which will hopefully in the future deal with those issues. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you both. Can we move on then to question T on your agendas this evening, which is Mr. Gary Norman to Councillor Howard Wollaston.
Thank you, Mr. Norman. Yes, the council recognises that a range of people use this site. As a plan B, careful consideration will be given to how best to balance the needs of the local community. Our priority is to improve opportunities for physical activity to take place across the district. As part of this, we have already started preliminary studies to improve the playing field offer at the Diamond on the assumption that Plan A is successful.
Do you have a supplementary, Mr. Norman?
Yes, I do. Good evening.
Good evening.
Can I ask, are your report mentions that you find that Plan B of using the Diamond is satisfactory? Are you aware of your own, and it mentions your SSL report, are you aware that your report from SSL mentioned, among other things, that potential harm to the wider landscape and potential impacts on Greenham and Crookham Commons SSSI are a huge downside to the proposal? That planners, that's you by the way, do not consider the site to be sustainable in transport terms, and that the site would no longer be available as a more general amenity green space for use by the local community, having a detrimental impact on wider access to green infrastructure. Now, the dictionary definition of satisfactory, Cambridge Dictionary, by the way, is good or good enough. So are you saying that all those issues are good enough for you? Thank you.
I think the answer to your question is that we appreciate it's not the ideal site, and hence the reason we're progressing with the Rugby Football Club site. In terms of whether it could actually take what is required, the answer is yes, it can. But I'm not saying by any means that it's the most suitable solution.
Thank you both. Can we therefore move on to item G, or question G on your agendas this evening, which is question from Mr. Alan Pearce to Councillor Richard Sumner.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Mr. Pearce, for your question. A woodland TPO was placed on this land by the council some time ago, and a woodland TPO by definition is temporary in nature and used to protect an area whilst a detailed investigation is undertaken to see if the trees justify further protection. This could be due to a pending planning application, for example. In this instance, further study has identified that none of the trees were considered worthy of protection as an individual TPO. The TPO was therefore not removed, it was simply that the woodland TPO lapsed.
Do you have a supplementary, Mr. Pearce?
Yes, please, if I may. Thank you for the answer, sir. Could I have a copy of that, please, if I could?
A copy of what I've said, or a copy of
of the report or the paperwork?
I can ask officers if that's something that can be shared. Yes, certainly. If that's possible, then I'm sure we can do that for you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you both. Can we move on then to item F on this evening's agenda, which is question from Councillor Vaughan Miller to Councillor Howard Wollaston.
Councillor Miller, thank you for your question. I'm pleased to say that none of our grass pitches are being ruined by overplaying. It is true that our grass pitches are heavily used and suffer as a consequence of climatic conditions and general use. By following Sport England guidance on use and with regular maintenance, these generally sustain the use to which they are put through the season. We will periodically take pitches out of use for additional maintenance during the season without impacting on capacity. However, this is not a regular occurrence. Our playing pitch strategy, adopted in February of last year, recognises the need for more 3G artificial pitches, and we are working hard to identify additional community locations for a structural rollout over the coming years. This will further improve the position. 3 are currently at the early stage of being considered.
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Miller?
Yes, thank you. And more 3G pitches are very welcome. But considering the council is obviously capable of managing football grounds appropriately, then why has there been repeated statements in recent meetings that the reason for rejecting requests to open the Faraday Road football ground for organised football for youth, men's and ladies teams in Newbury is that it would ruin the pitch? Is that deliberate misleading of members and the public, or what is the reason why that has been stated?
Councillor Wollaston.
Thank you for that, Councillor Miller. The reason I think is the amount of use on the pitch. I mean, most of these pitches around the district are used by youth teams and so forth, and can be used far more than for senior teams.
Thank you, Councillor Wollaston. Can we move on then to item I on our agendas this evening, which is Mr. Paul Morgan to Councillor Ross McKinnon.
Thank you very much, Leader. And thanks, Mr. Morgan. Hello again. I understand you have now been provided with the table. Any additional information requested arising out of a response to a public question such as this, it does need to be considered in light of our obligation around confidentiality and or commercially sensitive information, and of course our duties under the Freedom of Information Act 2000 and associated legislation. That is why you were advised that your request should go to the Freedom of Information team. It was expeditiously referred to that team and dealt with. Thanks.
Do you have a supplementary, Mr. Morgan?
No, I don't.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Okay, in which case can we go to question L, which is Mr. John Stewart to Councillor Howard Wollaston.
Mr. Stewart, thank you for your question. This is funding which is provided for the general upkeep and minor improvements to the Hennick Worthy facility as a whole, both grounds and pavilion, and invariably covers the costs of replacement of ancillary sports equipment. For example, last year we had to buy dugouts to accommodate NTFC use of the facility. This funding is not designated to a specific project as such.
Do you have a supplementary, Mr. Morgan? Oh, sorry, Mr. Stewart.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Apologies there. Okay, we can then move on to item Q on our agenda, which is Mr. Lee McDougall to Councillor Howard Wollaston.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. McDougall. This report is focused on formalising discussions between the Council and the Rugby Club. There will be future discussions about who might be in a position to run the operation. The Council will look at a range of options based on credible business plans that ensure a sustainable future.
Do you have a supplementary question, Mr. McDougall?
Yeah, just a quick one, if I may. Councillor, do you have any idea the costs that would be required to run a local football team? So for your business case, do you have that level of information at the moment?
We have some indicative figures, but they are very, very basic.
Are you able to share them, or even if it's after the meeting, that'll be fine?
It might be out of the meeting if you don't mind, sir.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you both. Okay, in which case we can move to item P on our agenda, and it's back to Mr. Jason Braidwood to Councillor Howard Wollaston.
Mr. Braidwood, thank you for your question. Yes, the purpose of the lease and any joint use agreement between the Rugby Club and the Council will be to ensure everyone involved with the operation understands their responsibilities and objectives. Forgive me. The Rugby Club is already committed to becoming a community sports facility.
Do you have a supplementary, Mr. Braidwood? Have we lost Mr. Braidwood again? Stephen, can we see, is Mr. Braidwood still on?
He's on but muted, Leader.
Okay, Mr. Braidwood, you need to unmute. Mute. Mr. Braidwood, I'm going to have to move on.
Move on, because whoever's controlling it's not doing it right, so move on.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Braidwood. In which case we can move to item question R on our agenda, which is Mr. Alan Pearce to Councillor Howard Wollaston.
Thank you, Mr. Pearce. Once Newbury Rugby Club had formally agreed to the terms of the lease, which we anticipate in the next few weeks, the final heads of terms will return to Executive for sign-off in April. During that period, the Council will secure the services of a project manager. We do not anticipate any planning policy issues with the proposal given its existing use. The detailed planning application will be submitted in the spring with a view to the contract procurement process, the construction of the ground being completed in early autumn, and for the ground to be ready to open by the end of March 2022. I do acknowledge that this is a tight timetable with little room for mishaps, but the officer team will do its level best to meet it.
Do you have a supplementary question, Mr. Pearce?
It's a very tight time frame, but no, I don't. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. In which case we move to Mr. Councillor Vaughan Miller, question J on our agenda, and that's to Councillor Dominic Bowick.
Sorry, I asked for this to be provided as a written answer.
Councillor Miller, I'm taking you're here, so I'm giving you your questions as they're applied. So if we could have the answer, please, from Councillor Dominic Bowick.
With you there. Sorry, Leader. Please bear with me. Thank you for your question, Councillor Miller. The council did indeed apply for make a bid for funding. Unfortunately, through our youth offending team, but unfortunately, we were not successful. I know that other bodies such as the office of locally, the office of the Police and Crime Commissioner made bids, as did Berkshire Youth, for monies to support our local youth, and they were both successful.
Do you have a supplementary, Mr. Miller?
No, thanks very much.
Okay, members of the public, we have now done 30 minutes worth of public questions and there's still a number to go. Therefore, everybody has had their questions answered and I'm going to suggest that we give written answers for the remaining questions. Stephen, if we could make that arrangement, please, so that we can move on with the rest of this evening's agenda. But thank you all for joining us this evening and we look forward to hearing back from you again. Okay, in which case we can move to item 5 on our agenda this evening, which is petitions. Are we aware of any petitions that have been handed in? No, I'm not seeing any and I wasn't aware of any, so I will take that as a no. In which case we can move on to the main body of this evening's item 6, which is our Culture Heritage Strategy for 2020 through to 2030. Before I, well, I'll hand over to Councillor Wollaston to present his report, but I understand that there's a slight error with one of the tables. So just to highlight that, I think Councillor Bridgman has noted that and we will just refer to that as we go through it as well. So Councillor Bridgman, did you want to just highlight where that error is once Councillor Wollaston has presented the report?
Yes, indeed. I just think the table might be a little bit more explanatory. On page 49.
Shall we let the main body of the report go through first, and then we'll come back to that?
Of course.
Thank you.
Just so everyone knows where I'm going, it's page 49, Leader.
Thank you. Councillor Wollaston, would you like to introduce the report? And before you do, does this find a seconder?
Yes, Leader, I'm happy to second this.
Okay, over to you, Councillor Wollaston.
Thank you, Leader. In the midst of a pandemic, it is sometimes difficult to focus on things like cultural and heritage issues. But this is a 10-year strategy, during which time the current crisis that we are in at the moment will be largely forgotten. This strategy reflects the views of many people who responded to the public consultation and makes it clear that culture and heritage are important to the people of West Berkshire. The officers have done a marvellous job of bringing this together, and I sincerely hope that most of its recommendations will be seen to have taken place during the lifetime of the plan. A project board is being established, which I would initially chair, to create a focus on achievement of objectives. I heartily recommend approval of this strategy.
Thank you, Councillor Wollaston. Councillor Berwick, do you have anything you would like to add to that?
Yes, thank you, Leader. As lead member for education, I'm pleased to second Councillor Wollaston's proposal that we adopt this important strategy. Adoption will lead to actions that support and promote opportunities for education, training and employment. These actions will underpin the objective of improving access for our children and young people to life chances that we would wish for all of them. Away from the classroom, away from their remote lessons or the Zoom workshop, our young people can find stimulation and reward from participating in arts of all forms and in cultural activities. This strategy talks about the evidence that shows these activities enhance the health and well-being of us all. It can be shown that access to a rich cultural heritage improves the chances of young people going on to further and higher education, thereby contributing to our economic health. Leader, members, now, with children and young people facing unprecedented challenges, this strategy is before you for adoption at a timely moment, and I commend it to you.
Thank you, Councillor Berwick. Members of the executive, do you have any questions or concerns? I know you do, Councillor Bridgman, that you would like to raise at this point.
Leader, let me start by saying I really do support this strategy. From my perspective, with the adult social care portfolio, obviously the more, once we get this horrible pandemic out of the way, that we can encourage our, I'm going to call them senior citizens, to get out and about and visit things and engage both mentally and physically in the cultural heritage of the district, the better it is for them and the better it is for my portfolio and our budget, because making people active is something I'm very keen on. It keeps them out of our clutches. But the point I wanted to raise specifically was that I think, and I defer to Councillor Wollaston and officers, but I think that the table on page 49 needs another review. It appears to have the same titles to two completely different sets of numbers with the same column. So I don't know what the columns should say, but they don't make sense to me. Maybe I'm missing something, but just if officers could just pick that one up before this goes public and tidy that up. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Bridgman. Members of the Executive, does anybody else have anything they'd like to raise? In which case, I'll go across to my members opposite. Is there any questions for Councillor Wollaston? Got a few hands shot up there. Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Leader. I'm glad to see you saw my blue hand. My software doesn't seem to have been upgraded like some people's, so proves it works. Yeah, I have a question. Something that I think is missing from the strategy, and I wonder if the executive portfolio holder agrees, is a reference to the countryside as heritage. I know it's there in the recreation leisure strategy, but you know, we live in a wonderful countryside, and access to it via the Rights of Way network is free to all, irrespective of income. And I think we should find ways of providing better information about the historic uses of our Rights of Way network as part of our heritage. It's an important part of our of understanding our place in the world, and how this town and the district has evolved. And it just occurred to me, wearing my hat as the Local Access Forum representative of this council, that a lot of our culture is quite expensive to access, but this isn't. And it's one of the absolute crown jewels of this country, that we have a free to access Rights of Way network. And the fact that we achieved this, you know, in the post-war era when there was also austerity, I think is also relevant to the time we live in now. So I wondered if I could have a reaction from the portfolio holder.
Councillor Wollaston?
I couldn't agree with you more, Councillor Vickers, and I know the officers agree totally. So this is only a question of some wording, which I'd be very happy to discuss with you and put into the delivery plan. Easy.
Thank you, Councillor Wollaston.
Thank you,
we can take this
Councillor
offline, perhaps.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Marsh, you've been sat patiently with your hand up.
Thank you very much. My question is about a question for the strategy delivery group. If you look at the figures in the consultation, 77% of people want to see more tourism, 75% want more events to bring visitors to West Berkshire, and 73% say that there's more publicity and marketing needed to encourage them to come to West Berkshire. But at the same time, only 33.8% say it's easy to find out what's going on. Now, to me, it's blindingly obvious that what we need is a visitor information centre. And I'd like to ask and make a plea, really, that the group will consider this, because as many of us argued at the time, I think closing the information office in 2016 has proved a false economy. So could you at least consider that possibility? Because people visiting West Berkshire, in particular visiting Newbury, they need to get off that coach and for somebody to say, right, here's what we've got to offer. There's Shaw House, there's the battlefield, there's all these other, there's Hungerford, there's all these other things. And they're not going to know about it otherwise. And it also would be useful to people in West Berkshire, not all of whom know exactly where all these places are. So is that something that can be considered, please? Thank you.
Councillor Wollaston?
Answer, Councillor Marsh is yes. Clearly, where the bus station is adjacent to both the museum and also the library, so that doesn't seem to be beyond the wit of man to have a look at that as a possibility.
Thank you very much.
And Councillor Pattenden.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, we certainly recognise the abundance of arts, crafts, heritage, community organisations and other aspects of culture within West Berks, and we welcome the strategy or many aspects of it, and I think as long as it's the amount of time, effort and resources are not underestimated and undersupplied, then I think that there's lots to be positive about in this strategy. I think perhaps a few detailed points would be that Thatcham, Hungerford, Thiel, other parts of the district have a lot of cultural activities going on, and I think that they could have been explicitly mentioned here in this strategy. Also, the fact that a lot of residents in the eastern part of the district obviously go to Reading for their cultural entertainments and the cultural activities, and that's something that I think could also be introduced here, and a more sort of cooperative approach investigated, dealing with Reading Borough Council, for example.
Councillor Wollaston?
Well, I'm very happy to open a dialogue with them, but it's obviously something that's completely out of our control.
Okay, thank you. Have I got any other hands up? No. In which case, members...
Leader, I think Councillor Brooks is trying to.
Councillor Brooks, can you not find this hand again? They've even changed the colour of it, and you're on mute.
Now, it's up.
Okay. Councillor Brooks, apologies.
No, I'm just not quick enough. I thought my leader was going to make an intervention. I have to say, and I'll make it a question to Councillor Wollaston, the sheer lack of targets to measure whether the objectives have been met by 2030 is lamentable in this document. These strategies could almost be created by a report generator. It's simply regurgitating the national picture of what we've got in how many people go to heritage sites. It's regurgitating what people have told us. And frankly, it then comes up with a bunch of themes and objectives with no way of measuring or saying how you're going to achieve them. I just despair of all these glossy strategies that are motherhood and apple pie. Do you agree? You can say no, because you will say no, but honestly, it's not really worth the paper it's written on.
You're absolutely right. I do say no. I think you're being a little unfair, Councillor Brooks. The whole purpose of having it... No, I'm sorry. You can shake your head as much as you like. I think you're being very unfair on this. That is the whole purpose of the delivery board that's been put together, that we will be able to monitor exactly how we achieve things, and that will be brought back to executive in the future.
Thank you both. In which case, I've got a proposal on the table. I've got a set of recommendations, and they're laid out in 2.1 that the executive approve the Culture Heritage Strategy 2020 to 30, and then in 2.2 to set up the Culture Heritage Strategy Delivery Group with the key stakeholders and develop the delivery and action plan. And that's one of the things that within our communication and engagement strategy, we've made really clear. We can set the strategy, but we want to actually be able to engage to actually do the delivery plans. And it seems to be something that Councillor Brooks isn't in agreement with, but certainly as leader of this authority, I feel quite strongly that we should be working on those delivery plans and getting those right once the strategy is in place. So we have a set of recommendations before us. Please can executive members vote by raising their actual hand if they're in favour of the proposals to approve the recommendations this evening.
Thank you very much, Leader. I can declare
Leader,
that
sorry, I put my hand up so that I could just ask a question, so a point of order. Are we approving this based on the potential changes that Councillor Wollaston has discussed?
It will be the overall strategy with the changes that Councillor Bridgman highlighted at the start with regards to that table.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Members, if you could show your hands.
Thank you very much. I can declare that the recommendations have been approved. Thank you.
Thank you. In which case we can now move forward to item 7 on our agenda, which is the Newbury Sports Ground update. Councillor Howard Wollaston, I believe you're going to introduce this paper, and from the chair, I'm going to second it. So over to you, Councillor.
Thank you, Leader. We've already seen from the sheer quantity of public questions this evening the interest there is in this proposal. I must remind everyone this report purely agrees approval for officers to agree terms within parameters, and it is not a final sign-off. This will hopefully happen in April. I'm sure that I've addressed most of the issues where I can in the questions that have been answered already this evening. All that I can really add is that this proposal addresses the requirements the Council agreed to as part of the London Road Industrial Estate regeneration. It is an ideal position It cements community sporting in Newbury. It will provide a facility which we can be proud of as a town and allow Newbury men's and ladies teams to scale the ladders of their respective leagues. The scheme is future-proof to a Step 5 facility with relatively minimal additional expenditure required. We are commencing a public consultation exercise, which I hope will endorse this proposal. I'm delighted to recommend this report.
Thank you, Councillor Wollaston. I'm going to second this report because I'm actually very excited about this. We've heard an awful lot of questions over the last sort of 12 months with regards to this. But as somebody that grew up here in Newbury and raised her family here in Newbury and has spent many, many Sundays and Saturdays on the side of a football pitch cheering on my budding football players, I'm really excited to see that we could get a new sports ground option happening here in Newbury. I think what has happened since we brought our playing pitch strategy through, remember that was only the 23rd of February last year, and we saw there that there was really clear guidance. I think it was recommendation 11 within that playing pitch strategy that we needed to do this. We have made it the highest priority on the action plan to seek a suitable replacement for the Faraday Road Sports Ground. And yes, that does take time, and it does take a number of different reports into looking at different ground suitabilities. However, within the year, to have completed a comprehensive site analysis and identified preferred options to address this recommendation during a global pandemic is pretty good going as far as I'm concerned. And I think everybody that has been involved should be congratulated. It hasn't been an easy journey and we've heard a lot of noise around this, but I think that what we've got in front of us is exciting times. I'm particularly supportive around the recommendation of 2.1 to carry out a public consultation to seek the views of those interested in this area. As we've witnessed through the multiple public questions, there are many different interested parties in this development, and this will give them a chance to have their views heard and taken into consideration. And while I acknowledge that while the sports site is not in our ownership, it does present the most promising option for a new sports ground. And when I think about sharing a sports ground with the rugby club, I think about the 20-year successful partnership over at the Majeski Stadium. However, Reading fans amongst us at the moment might say it's not that successful, I believe, on their current form. But then if you look closer to home, we have wonderful facilities over at Henwick, where we have a sports ground where different sports successfully share that sports ground. And I think it's really good and prudent that we continue to develop with Plan B so that we can make sure that we look at the potential of the site and we collaborate with Newbury Rugby Club to have a win-win situation here for both football and rugby in Newbury. So I'm really happy to second this evening, and I'm really happy to see it here. I'm sure there's going to be lots and lots of questions on it, but I think we should all remember that this is a positive step for Newbury and a positive paper that if we can all collaborate on and work forward to, we can come up with a resolution that will suit our children in years to come. So I'm very happy to second this paper, and I'm also very happy to take any other questions or any other comments from the members of the executive first and foremost before I go across the opposition. Councillor Sumner.
Thank you, Leader. No questions, but a statement really, which is to support the point, especially that you've just made with regards to Reading and London Irish sharing a ground. It was phenomenally successful. They weren't the first to do it. They weren't the only to do it. But I think as precedence was set, it was something that became an option for a lot of clubs. And I believe from friends and people that were going there on a regular basis that it was immensely successful. And this could be absolutely superb for the town. I have no doubt in my mind at all.
Thank you, Councillor Sumner. Members of the Executive, do you have any other questions? In which case, I'm going to go across to the Leader of the Opposition, Councillor Dillon.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. The playing pitch strategy shows a clear lack of 3G provision across West Berkshire. So any recommendations that the administration would bring forward to have more 3G pitches available for use should be welcomed. But what I really struggle with, Leader, is the coupling of this facility with London Road. Because at present, at the rugby club, we have a rugby pitch, and at the football club, we have a football pitch. And we're going to lose 2 grass pitches and gain 1 3G pitch, which will be for mixed use, as the report states. So the total use of the site and the land isn't comparable to what the town currently has on offer. However, as a 3G pitch up at the rugby club site, would welcome that, and would welcome it going out to consultation to see what residents feel about it. You talk about your memories of watching your children growing up on the sidelines, a lifelong resident of Newbury. I played junior rugby for Newbury Rugby Club, and then on a Sunday afterwards would go to Hennick and then play football with my friends, and never the two did meet. So as someone who has played both sports, I think that mix will be interesting to see in the public consultation responses, to be honest with you. I just want to come on, I know other members from my group wish to speak, but in terms of your plan B, I think the public questions pulled it out quite succinctly, actually, of why the Diamond isn't a suitable site. And I'm really surprised to see it being recommended in the report so strongly as a fail-safe, as I don't believe it's deliverable. And actually, I think it would lead us to a worse provision than we currently have. The last thing, and I've spoken to Councillor Wollaston over email about this, and thank you for the email, Councillor Wollaston. It was just around the Part 2 aspects. And Councillor Wollaston has explained why it's in Part 2, but I do feel that some indicative costings around the site, not how much it's going to cost to run necessarily, but some of those initial costs, given that they're going to go into a budget round in March, according to the paper, could be made public now, so that actually when the public are consulting, they're doing it with some context. Are they saying yes to something that's going to cost 10 million, 20 million, or 1 million, or 10 grand? So I think we could provide a bit more information when we go out to consultation, just around some indicative costings. And I'll leave other comments for the rest of my group leader. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon, for your comments. I think Councillor Wollaston's come back, and it is a reminder to you all that we have 2 papers this evening. We won't be taking the vote for the paper in this first part of the meeting. It'll be in the private part 2, because this is obviously a negotiation, and it's a commercially sensitive negotiation. So it's something that we would want to make sure we have the ability to have those conversations in private, so that we are not displaying our hand when we're in the middle of a commercially sensitive negotiation. So that's why they're in part 2. But Councillor Howard Wollaston, I'll go across to you to come back on Councillor Dillon's points.
Thank you, Leader. Starting off on the question of the 2 grass pitches as opposed to 1 3G pitch, clearly a 3G pitch could be used far more intensively. So effectively, we're replacing more than 2 grass pitches. As you probably know, our strategy, which was agreed last February, bear with me, was that we were going to produce 7 3G pitches throughout the district over the next 10 years. This is only the first of many. And we're already looking in detail at 3 further pitches. In terms of public consultation, there are so many things involved in the negotiations going through, as well as other issues, which I've alluded to in my emails to you, Councillor Dillon, that it would be inappropriate for that information to be in the public domain at present.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Wollaston.
Leader, sorry, if I just come back, appreciate that you can play from 7 in the morning till 10 at night, but you can't kick 2 games off at 3 o'clock, Councillor Wollaston.
Leader, can I come back on that?
You can.
Sports Signal's recommendation is that grass pitches could only be used for 4 matches a week. This pitch would be able to use far more than that.
Thank you, Councillor Wollaston. I think you've had your response from Councillor Wollaston there. Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Brooks.
Saw my hand then. It's working.
I did. Well done.
Yes, I know. I'll get there eventually. Can I just get some clarification of if the Newbury Football Club ends up in this area within your plan, what economic impact have we considered where supporters will not be in the town centre, will not be spending money in the town centre before or after the game because they're up the hill? Have we done any assessment of that and what it might cost the local economy?
Councillor Wollaston?
Simple answer, Councillor Brooks, is no, we haven't, because it's premature at present, but it is was set out originally to be within 20 minutes of the existing site, and it is certainly well within that. I hope that answers your question.
Councillor Wollaston, they can walk from Faraday Road to the town centre, sir. They
Yes,
can't
and you
walk
can.
from Monk's Lane, sir.
I think, with respect, you could walk from Monk's Lane.
Well,
okay, thank you both. I think we've had your question asked and answered, both of you. A disagreement of opinion there. Okay, I've got Councillor Vickers next.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I'm also the ward member as well as the portfolio holder for planning. I mean, I have a couple of questions which I've given notice of on planning. In fact, I had three, but one of them was already answered by asked by a member of the public, really. I mean,
what I would say to you is, I would say that this is not a planning committee, Councillor Vickers. There will be planning committees in due course. So this proposal is about entering into a negotiation with Newbury Rugby Club. So if it's a technical planning question that you intend to ask, I suggest we wait till the planning committee to do so.
Well, my real overarching concern about this is the numbers and extent of risks. To my mind, red lights are flashing all over this project. And the history of projects that have anything to do with the London Road Industrial Estate tells me that it's very unlikely you will achieve your objectives on this. I wish you well, and we're not going to oppose this plan because, you know, I personally have long wondered why the rugby pitch couldn't be shared with football. But I have learned that, as our leader has alluded to, football and rugby communities don't get on particularly well. I have friends who love rugby who hate football and vice versa. So,
and there's an awful lot that do get on, Councillor Vickers, so I wouldn't sweep that brush at everybody.
Well, I like both sports.
I was going to say, so we're not going to enter into a sports debate at this point. The only thing I'd say is, you know, I'm pleased that you're supportive of the proposal. Remember, this is a decoupling from the London Road Industrial Estate. This is about an alternative solution. So I see these as two very separate projects now. But if you have a question for Councillor Wollaston with regards to the Newbury Rugby Club situation, then please do ask it.
I'm also aware that, you know, yes, I do have a question coming, but I hope you will allow me as a member of the opposition, given that it's a public meeting, to at least express my view as the planning spokesman that where we have at the moment no planning consent to complete the destruction of the existing facility at Faraday Road, no planning policy for the London Road Industrial Estate that really, although we know it's the aspiration of the council as a business to move football out of there, there's a great uncertainty about every aspect of the planning in terms of planning policy overall and in detail. And we are very much in favour as a party of redeveloping. We have huge ambitions for the redevelopment of London Road Industrial Estate. But for the reasons that Councillor Brooks has alluded to, there's nothing wrong in terms of economic development in retaining a football ground in the middle of the town. It's highly sustainable and it could be a part of making that site attractive. So we would not be, as the Irishman said, if I was wanting to do what you're doing and improve football facilities, I wouldn't start with this presumption that it has to be done somewhere else besides the Faraday Road area. And I think this is a huge risk. My specific question is, does anybody know whether if Sport England or the FA do not approve of what you're trying to do, they can actually veto the whole proposal? And you know, has that been looked into? I see there's an indication, a sort of hope in the report that the response will be favourable. But to my mind, that isn't enough when you're setting out to spend an unknown amount of money, as far as the public concerned, in creating this facility.
Councillor Wollaston, do you want to respond with regards to the views of? Thank you,
Councillor Viggs. I think we're in the land of what if at the moment. All the indications we have from all three sporting organisations are very, very positive. Clearly, the devil's in the detail. It always will be. but we have no reasons to suppose why they would not support this. So I really can't see why you are sort of querying the whole issue, to be honest.
Okay. Thank you. I've got Councillor McKinnon with his hand back up. Councillor McKinnon.
Thanks, Leader. Yeah, just to come back a little bit. Good evening, Councillor Vickers, and happy New Year to you. You know, we've had this discussion many times about how Faraday Road is integral to the redevelopment of the London Road Industrial Estate. I'll make the point again in response to what you've said. Planning for the new facility will be considered on its own merits. And you know, because we've had these discussions both in public and over email with colleagues, that the London Road project is progressing towards planning application stage and planning documents. And again, you're asking for things that haven't happened yet, shouldn't have happened yet, and will be happening now. So I just wanted to reassure you that that is all in hand, and you don't need to keep making the same points in these meetings. Thanks, Leader.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Cole, but I'm not looking at this as a planning committee this evening. This is an executive decision about whether to progress with a negotiation between Newbury Rugby Club and ourselves. Councillor Cole, is it a planning?
Only to reiterate, really, Leader, what Councillor McKinnon has said. I think Councillor Vickers is extremely premature in his demands. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Abbs.
Thank you very much, Leader. Yeah, several words have been used already about consultation, collaboration, community, and so on and so forth. But as far as I'm aware, I was at Greenham Parish meeting last night because I happen to be a Greenham Parish councillor as well as a district councillor, and I'm the ward councillor in which this facility will be placed. I wasn't even asked once about the diamond, which is Plan B. And if I had been, I could have given you a lot of detail about how unsuitable that site is. So what really concerns me is that Plan A does fail. Okay, you're all hopeful that it won't fail, but it might fail. Otherwise, you wouldn't have a Plan B. And the Plan B, if that comes through as part of this sign-off, is actually a terrible solution. I think most of you are also parish councillors somewhere or other as well, and you know how even frequently members of the public turn up. As this hit the newswire yesterday, we had people knocking on the door basically to come to the parish meeting. It's great to have the public there, but what were they scared about? Somehow the diamond becoming the default because of the way that this now goes through this evening. So whereas we're all probably on the same page, we want the football community to have a facility. I won't bore everybody with how stupid it was to go the route we have done, but the reality is we need a football pitch for them again. But if you're going to use things like collaboration, community and so on, please involve other councillors and the community, at least at a parish level, before you come out with these proposals which are become de facto adopted. Because you're right, the Conservatives are currently in control with a minority of the vote, but that won't always be the case. And you do need to involve others in this kind of long-term decision making. Thank you.
Thank you for your thoughts, Councillor Abbs. Councillor Williston, do you want to respond to those?
All I do is encourage the opposition to pull behind us to try and make this work.
Okay, and we are required to consider alternatives, and that is what the report shows. So, and we're opening up to public consultation. So I think we're quite within our rights to do that. So, Councillor Macro.
Thank you, Leader. On page 93, it says that you're looking to start construction in mid to late 2021. And completion of the site for the end of March 2022. That sounds incredibly ambitious, bearing in mind you've still got to negotiate a legal agreement with the rugby club. You've got to get planning permission. You've got to go out to tender for a contractor to actually build the thing, and then negotiate a contract with them. So how confident are you that you can actually achieve these milestones?
Councillor Williston.
Councillor Macro, I think I've already answered this in a question to one of the public. We appreciate it's a stretching timescale, but we believe that with the following wind and the officers' efforts, that we can achieve it.
Thank you, Councillor
I hope
Williston.
you're right.
So do I.
Okay, Councillor Marsh, you've been sat with your hand very patiently. Apologies.
That's okay, Leader. I'm just a bit concerned that you're jumping the gun by going into detailed negotiations, because there hasn't been any consultation. I know you're going to do consultation, but there hasn't been consultation with the groups that I think are probably the most affected, namely local residents in my ward, Newbury Wash Common, and the very significant number of football clubs that until 2.5 years ago were using Faraday Road, that representing hundreds of footballers. Now, what if the consultation is overwhelmingly against this plan? You're already going to be quite a long way down the road. We've heard what a hurried timetable there is, and you're going to be negotiating with the rugby club. How much stock are you going to put into what people say in the consultation exercise if you're already going into this process? Is my question.
Thank you. Councillor Wollaston.
There have already been informal discussions with a number of the Newbury football teams, all of whom are provisionally supportive. And clearly we are on a tight timescale, I admit, and the only way that can work is to effectively twin track consultation and negotiations with the rugby club.
Thank you, Councillor Wollaston. Councillor Pattenden.
Thank you, Leader. As a West Berks councillor for Greenham, and speaking for my fellow West Berks Greenham councillors, Councillor Barnett and Councillor Billy Drummond, in our view, the plan B for the facility, namely the Diamond Field in Greenham, is not suitable at all. It's too small. It lacks infrastructure for access and for parking. And if it were to go ahead, it would represent a very serious loss of amenity to the local community and the current users of the site. So in our view, it really shouldn't be included as part of this report, which then also brings me to the point, even though the overall objectives of what you're trying to achieve, namely a new 3D pitch, are positive, without a suitable plan B, how much risk does that introduce to the overall project?
Councillor Wollaston.
The initial negotiations with the Rugby Football Club have gone on now for several weeks and are very positive. They are committed to being a community sporting facility, and we don't anticipate any significant problem there. In terms of planning, clearly it's an existing sporting facility anyway, so there's no policy objections. And as the Diamond is very much a plan B, and I mean a plan B. We want to do the Rugby Football Club.
And I think it's also worthwhile remembering, Councillor Pattenden, that consultation on the facilities will be meaningful and the details will be coming back to executive. So those consultations are yet to take place and they're part of the recommendations this evening. I'm going to go to...
Could I add one thing? Because one of the answers to the questions which we didn't get through to was that part of that consultation will include the plan showing the proposed facility.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wollaston. I'm going to go to Councillor Masters.
Thank you very much, Leader. I have a number of questions for this part one of the meeting and a number for the part two, but if you will indulge me, would you like me to ask a question singularly and then get an answer, or go through?
I'll take notes as we go through.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wollaston. Given the tight time frame that's been reiterated numerous times by yourself and others on this subject, one of the prominent risks is reputational damage. How much are you prepared to risk further reputational damage, considering how poorly the public at large believe the London Road and the Faraday Road situation is been in the past? Are you not setting yourselves up for a fall because of this tight time frame? If there's a hiccup in planning, a hiccup in the contracts, hiring and firing of contractors, etc., are you not risking more reputational damage to the council. Paragraph 4.7 talks about an external project manager. Now, the very crux of the internal inquiry was very much focused on internal project management. Is the decision to go on an external project manager basis, at some expense, I'm sure, a reflection of a lack of confidence that it can be delivered internally due to cuts to manpower, etc.? In terms of the location at the rugby club, it is adjacent to the proposed Sandalford development, and this is not a planning question per se. However, it says that traffic and environmental modelling considerations have been looked into already. What modelling has been done in terms of traffic usage that's going to be induced by moving people, many of whom will be coming from outside of Newbury, Fatcham, etc., to play football, and who would have formerly been down at Faraday Road? And has that modelling reflected the impact of the development at Sandalford, which is already under scrutiny for that car-centric development itself? Are we looking at having further congestion in that area that's unsustainable? And I agree completely with Councillor Brooks' point about people being able to go to a football match in Faraday Road previously and then the night walk into town in 5-10 minutes. It's unviable. It's a 25-30 minute walk from the rugby club at least into town, and with the best will in the world, supporters are not going to be doing that on foot. My next question. How many meetings or conversations via email, phone, etc., have in the last few months with Sport England and the FA, etc., taken place between officers and or portfolio holders? And have those assurances been formal in terms of being positive, or have they merely been verbal? And you talk about good working relationships with stakeholders, obviously the rugby club. Why, with the community groups and the grassroots rugby groups, are they going to be party to any working groups that discuss the intricacies moving forward? And I know they'll be able to work in the consultation and input in there, but I think we need more closer working relationships there.
Councillor Masters, some of these questions are repeats of what we've had. Can you just, if there's something new that you're going to add to the debate?
I'd just like some clarification.
Because some of these questions around the consultation, etc., have
well, I'm
already
sure
been
Councillor
answered.
Wollaston can elaborate.
So can we try and can I ask all members? I'm conscious of time here as well, that we ask
I think this
new and pertinent information.
Forgive me, Councillor Doherty. With the bulk of this debate and discussion being in part 2, I think it's extremely important that members of the public.
I agree, but a lot of these questions have been asked and had discussion.
Then the answers will be to hand, I'm sure.
Okay, over to you, Councillor Wollaston.
Right, I wish I'd take them one at a time now with that number of questions.
Question 1. I would suggest you focus on those which brings new information to this evening's debate, Councillor.
I'll run through them very rapidly. The first one is reputational damage. I don't think you just have to decouple what's happened in the past to what we're doing now.
Unfortunately, the public won't be, though, will they?
Well, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to. We are very focused on what we're trying to achieve, and we will get there. Item 2 was external project manager. There's not a question of cuts to manpower. This is specialist project management if you're developing out a new sports pitch. And I've already said in one of my answers previously that we will be going out very shortly to appoint an external project manager. Third question related to traffic usage. Certainly previous examples, if we look up the previous Faraday Road site, it did not create a huge amount of traffic. and I don't see why the new rugby club one should generate significant amounts either. And it does come from both ways. It's not just from the Newbury town centre, but also the opposite direction.
Forgive me, Councillor Wilson. What are you basing? I mean, it's okay to say I don't think that had a material effect on.
Well, I think the issue is, Councillor Masters, this is yet to go through planning with the highways report, and that's the very point.
But it says in this report
into the planning piece
that these things have been looked at, and that's what I'm trying to clarify. Has the modelling actually been done, or is it just wishful thinking?
With respect, Councillor Masters, I don't think it's wishful thinking. It's looking at what has happened previously, and it's a reasonable assumption.
Can you publish what those assumptions were made on then, please, Councillor Wollaston?
No. There's
nothing
specific.
I think you're in danger of going into the project management here, because what will happen with a project, as we have with all projects, is a risk register will be set up, and any of these items will be put on those and taken into consideration as we move forward with this. At this moment, this paper is an agreement to go to consultation, an agreement to enter into negotiation. And Councillor Masters, you're asking questions that are going to come down the line in time, which aren't appropriate at this moment in time. So I'm going to move on. Councillor Dillon, you've been sat with your hand up, and then I'm going to Councillor Barnett.
Yeah, thank you, Leader, for that, for allowing me to come back in. It was just a technical question, just on the consultation, if I may. So when people are responding, are they to give their views on Plan A and Plan B? And when Councillor Williston said it will be accompanied with plans, will that include drawings for Plan A and for Plan B? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon. Councillor Wollaston.
The intention is to go look at Plan A only, and the plan that will be there is effectively a site plan showing the location of the pitch and the facilities around it.
Thank you, Councillor Wollaston. Sorry, Councillor Barnett, you've been sat there very patiently.
Thanks very much, Leader, and I recognise you've had a considerable number of questions placed on you and obviously on Councillor Wollaston. So I try not to regurgitate some of the questions that already come forward. Obviously, there's 2 or 3 issues that I have a little concern about, and very much relating to Pigeons Farm, which of course is part of the ward, which is already mentioned by one of my fellow councillors already. I have a little concern in relationship to some of the points that Councillor Masters did raise relating to traffic generation, and I recognise that obviously it will have to be subject to highways assessments, but one's only got to look at some of the amount of extra vehicles that are in Thatcham West, Hennick Lane at a weekend. You know, if we can expect seeing something like that, if it's a fallback from unfortunately not going down the route at the rugby club, and it then starts coming back, considering a Pigeons Farm, it's not an area which would be able to accommodate a large number of vehicles. And furthermore, I don't want to see the local facilities that are already using that site being affected. There's a lot of local community activities taking place, and that's one of the things I would hate to see, the loss of good community activities that have been helping the local community for a long period of time. And furthermore, I conclude on something which probably some of the members are not aware of. If the golf club decide to put their planning application forward, and it could well happen at some stage in the future, they were hoping that the access would be right by this particular site. And again, that would actually obstruct further parking, and also it would generate a lot more vehicles. So I think these points need to be seriously considered. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Barnett. And as I said, I'm sure they will be taken into consideration with any due consultation around that particular site. Councillor Cole, I've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It's really, Leader, it's a comment. I'm just fascinated and surprised that Councillor Masters is concentrating and concerned about vehicle movements into and out of this proposed site. I would have thought he would have been encouraging and welcoming the fact that people could have extra exercise and walk to and from the rugby ground in order to support his green principles. There seems to be an awful lot of concentration on vehicle movement when we're trying to discourage people from using their cars. Merely a comment, Chairman.
Thank you for your thoughts, Councillor Cole. I think we've had a lot of conversation and debate. I think most of the questions have come out that could come out. I've heard quite a few different issues raised several times. You know, these are all things that will need to be taken into consideration as the consultation proceeds. So thank you everybody for raising those points. I think they're valid points and points that we'll certainly be looking at and taking away from this meeting as well. We don't have to do anything more at this point because we're not actually voting at this point because it will come back in part 2. So therefore, unless Shiraz tells me differently, I can move on to the next agenda item.
That's fine.
That's fine. Okay, thank you. In which case we can move on to item 8 on our agendas this evening, which is our members' questions. I'd like to thank all those members who have submitted their questions for this evening's executive meeting. Please note that in accordance with the new process, you do not need to say, I asked the question standing in my name. Your question will appear on the screen and will be answered by the relevant portfolio holder. You will then be given the opportunity to ask a supplementary question, but please remember that this must be to clarify the response provided and not introduce any new business or start to make statements around your own position. In accordance with paragraph 5.12.9 of the Constitution, where questions have more than one question, only their first question will be answered. If after all other first questions have been asked and answered and there is sufficient time, we will answer subsequent questions. Please note that the time limit for members' questions is restricted to 60 minutes. And if your question has not been answered in that time, you will receive a written response within 5 clear working days. The response given either verbally at the meeting or in writing will be published on the Council's website. I therefore would like to invite Councillor Howard Wollaston to answer Councillor Martha Vickers' question A on the agenda this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. I have to say I was very concerned by your question as it was contrary to what I have been informed. As it makes reference to police data, I have consulted with the Deputy Local Police Area Commander in preparing this response. And the Deputy Commander did provide a full explanation when this same data was highlighted previously. Reassurance has been provided that the increase you raised concern about was due to a comparison between data from Q1 2019-20 and Q1 2020-21. And this has given an inaccurate picture of the level of domestic abuse related incidents during the pandemic and the lockdown periods. Effectively, it was a statistical irregularity in Q1 2019. Overall, during lockdown 1, i.e. 23rd of March to the 31st of May, there was a 7% reduction in calls to Thames Valley Police in relation to domestic abuse incidents and crimes. In comparison with the same period in 2019, there was a slight increase in the number of crimes, 17. However, it should be noted that in February 2020, before lockdown, there had been the highest number of domestic incidents and crimes for quite some time. Therefore, March and April were months where domestic related incidents and crimes decreased. It was recognised during the first lockdown that victims of domestic abuse may believe that they could not leave their homes because of COVID restrictions. And throughout the pandemic, this council has echoed national messages and also instigated its own local messaging campaigns to ensure that victims know that if it isn't safe to stay, they can leave. With the announcement of the current lockdown, a new campaign has been launched to reiterate the message. This council, in partnership with other local agencies, will continue with awareness-raising activities to ensure victims of domestic abuse know how to access the support they need. The council and all partner agencies will continue to closely monitor data so that any change in the number of incidents can be responded to promptly. I reiterate that during lockdown 1, there was a reduction in domestic-related calls to Thames Valley Police, and during lockdown 2, this trend continued. It is reported to me that compared to last year, there's been an increase in arrests made and also an increase in positive outcomes for domestic crimes. Finally, it is important to note that West Berkshire local police area figures do not reflect the national reported trends in response to domestic abuse.
Thank you, Councillor Wollaston. Councillor Vickers, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, well, thank you for that clarification, Councillor Wollaston. I think the different figures have been a bit confusing. So thank you for that clarification. And thank you for raising the issue about emphasising the issue that victims of domestic abuse can leave home, because that is a concern I was going to raise with you. So thank you very much for that. I suppose my supplementary would be, would you agree that there is a concern that a potential incidence of domestic abuse possibly might not be picked up by the usual professionals that are meeting with families because of the lack of social contact? So can you see how this might be addressed? And also it puts an added burden on the community to some extent. And are there any plans to alert the community to their possible obligation now that there is less contact with families who might be at risk? I hope that's considered a reasonable supplementary.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. I mean, clearly we are in very difficult times. No one can ignore that. But there are a number of local initiatives, and if I could highlight one, it is that pharmacists and chemists are being encouraged to be helpful in this instance. And there's a messaging will be going out very shortly to assist this. But it is not an easy solution, I'm afraid, when we're in lockdown.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. Councillor Bowick, your hand shot up there. Were you coming in there, or is this a point of order? Or?
Yes. Thank you, Leader. I'd just like to respond, if I may, to Councillor Vickers' concerns, because of course there is an ever-present risk of abuse in all families, and amongst some of our more disadvantaged families, it's appearing as well. It's true that the number of non-accidental childhood injuries has increased during this time, for a variety of reasons. Really? But our social workers have been coached and briefed on the increased risk to some of our children, and they bear this in mind in the risk assessments that they undertake, from which they decide what form of statutory contact they might employ. So our social workers are aware of the increased risk, Councillor Vickers, and are doing all they can to manage that risk.
Thank you, Councillor Bowick, for that additional information. And it's reassuring to know that everybody's working hard to address this point. Can I move on, please, to question B on this evening's agenda, which is Councillor Marsh to Councillor Richard Sumner.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Marsh, for your question. I have to confess to being a little confused. I'm conscious that I shouldn't drive out there. I have taken the opportunity to have a look on Google Maps. Not advertising, it just happened to be available. I'm pleased to say that the whole of Northbrook Street is covered by the Newbury Town Centre 20-mile-an-hour zone. And using Google Maps, I could actually see signs that backed that up on the photographs there from the clock tower end. So I'm either misreading your question, or there's a slight breakdown in communication, but that whole area is 20 miles an hour.
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Marsh?
Only that I was very much under the impression that it was 30, and perhaps, Councillor Sumner, we could discuss this at the next Transport Advisory Group and just clarify any ambiguities, and apologies if I'm wrong, but I'm delighted if I'm wrong, because I think it should be 20, obviously.
Yep, happy to do that. I'll add it to the agenda, no problem.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you both. Councillor Barnett, I believe you've got a question C on the agenda, and actually it's going to be Councillor Arderwater that is answering that particular question.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Barnett, for your question. This situation about higher levels of dog waste has been actively monitored right now, and officers are identifying the most frequently used dog and litter bins. We've tasked our contractor to make additional visits to those parks and open spaces where bins are being filled more frequently, Of course, if you're aware of particular sites where frequency of emptying is not adequate, I just encourage you, and in particular encourage your residents, to use the council's online reporting form to highlight this, and appropriate action will be taken. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Barnett?
Yes, Leader. And strangely enough, actually, supplementary's been partially answered. But if you beg my indulgence to raise it, there's a couple other points which are relevant for Councillor Arderwater to answer. Thanks very much for that answer, Councillor Arderwater. Even though you've identified several collections are programmed in each area on regular basis, it's clearly visible several waste bins have been overflowing on recent occasions over the last few months, and not only during the major lockdown, and especially within my ward in Greenham. Therefore, can officers make sure that both frequent collections where bins are clearly overflowing and can be possibly to place notices around the bins? Because I feel that encouraging dog walkers and dog owners to take their bags home and not disregard extra waste which cannot be accommodated in the bins is probably just as much important as actually regularly emptying the bins.
Councillor Arderwater.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Barnett. That's a very good point, and I'll ask officers to look into that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. In which case we can move on to question D on our agenda this evening, which is Councillor Macro to Councillor Bridgman.
Yes, and thank you, Councillor Macro. And as everyone has said, Happy New Year to you. As you will know from the answer I gave to one of your questions at last month's executive, although that was in writing, the Berkshire West Clinical Commissioning Group sits at the lower end of the national rankings in terms of payment for continuing healthcare, or CHC funding. Now, 2 comments upon that. First, we've got to remember that this isn't just West Berkshire, this is Berkshire West CCG, as it is presently constituted, and I'll come back to that in a moment. And it not only covers West Berkshire, it covers Wokingham and Reading as well, and the numbers relate to all 3. Second, I would presume that the CCG would argue that it's protecting the funds of the NHS in being robust in how it responds to funding requests. So this is all public money, and we're basically in a discussion as to which pot it comes out of. Now, I do think that there is scope for the CCG to treat more individuals as meeting the criteria for CHC than is currently the case. And therefore, how are we doing? What are we doing about that? First, we should recognise that, as with many things, COVID has got in the way. CHC was suspended as a result of COVID, but assessments are now restarted, and we actually have employed an additional assessor using CCG money, and that's intended to progress the work. In the medium term, there's a project underway which is targeted on 2 areas of CCG funding, both CHC and Section 117, so that's mental health aftercare. That project sits within the Modernising Adult Social Care Programme, and its aim is to ensure fair settlements from the CCG in both domains. There are various models out there to assess who should be funded, and we're currently in discussion with the CCG about their use and looking to draw on good practice from other parts of the BOB integrated care system. The other point to make is that in the longer term, the stated aim to have a single CCG at the BOB ICS level may also play into the process. Although the recent paper from the NHS on integrating care actually refers to ICS leaders delegating significant budgets to a place level, nevertheless, this might include continuing healthcare, and we can conceive an argument that even if funding is at place level, nevertheless, the modelling should be at system level for consistency. So those discussions are ongoing, and I'm looking forward to continuing those and seeing how officers do in that process.
Thank you, Councillor Bridgman. Councillor Macro, have you got a supplementary?
Thank you, Councillor Bridgman, and Happy New Year to you too. Yes, it sounds promising that there's some actual work going on to actually improve the situation, because according to the figures you gave me for the last meeting, we were 134th out of 135 for standard CHC, and for fast track it wasn't much better. So we're not a deprived area, but on the other hand, there is deprivation in the area, and there's we've got poor health and so on. So we shouldn't be that far down the tracks. So I'm very pleased that's happening. But are you aware that we went through an exercise a few years ago before Berkshire West was formed, when we were in a similar situation, and we actually had a whole series of meetings at the commission and actually got things significantly improved, and it's gone backwards again. So I think it might be wise just to go back and see if you've got some records of what you managed to do down with the Overview and Scrutiny Commission. Thank you.
Well, if I can come back on that. Firstly, when you say we, of course, it's not we, it's not West Berkshire Council, it is Berkshire West CCG that sits in the rankings, and I've already commented on where their obligations and determinations lie. So far as what has gone on in the past, I think we are in a new framework. I mean, firstly, we are dealing at the moment with a CCG that sits at a place level, so it covers 3 local authorities, 2 acute care trusts, an ambulance service, and the CCG itself. So you know, the dynamic of the CCG is different to what it went before. And we know that the government has pressed for CCG being at a system level, even though the current guidance appears to might be move the money to a local place level. So I just think we're in a different place, and I am very, and I know officers are working quite hard on this one, and there is as I say, there is a project to improve things, but we shall see how that turns out.
Okay, thank you both.
Like good news. Thank you.
Then we can move to question F on your agenda this evening, which is Councillor Pattenden to Councillor Bowick. Councillor Bowick? If you're speaking, you're on mute, but I can't see that. Stephen, can you confirm, is Councillor Bowick still with us?
I am, Leader. I'm having mouse problems, okay. Not rodents. Thank you for your question, Councillor Pattenden. Ensuring pupil and staff safety is a top priority for this council, as it is for heads and governors. Since last March, schools and other settings have been making provision for children based on government guidance that has been regularly updated. Various council teams, including education, health and safety, HR, public health and legal, have supported the interpretation of this guidance. They have provided advice and tools to help schools and settings assess risks. Officers have worked tirelessly with heads, including in the evenings and at weekends, to make sure safe, practical arrangements are in place, as well as in reviewing risk assessments and making site visits. The council has sourced PPE when schools have found this difficult to obtain. Both education and children and family services have been particularly active in monitoring provision for disadvantaged children, who remain a particular focus for us. We have supported the provision of free school meals and have helped ensure remote learning is as safe as it can be. From the start of term, we have supported the rollout of lateral flow device testing in secondary settings and stand ready to do so for primary schools. Throughout, we have maintained a positive dialogue with unions who have endorsed our approach and are grateful for the support we have provided to their members.
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Pattenden?
I do, thank you. So, I mean, given that there's been quite large numbers of cases amongst school staff and amongst pupils and the impact of that, does that all mean you feel that the West Berkshire schools, nurseries, colleges are all as safe as they should be, Councillor Blowick?
I think they are extremely safe. I'm not sure what should be means. And I think that we review the data every week, and Councillor Bridgman is our data expert on this, and I'm sure he'll be able to back me up when I say the evidence is not clear that the cases that are identified in schools are contracted in schools. I don't think that's understood. The fact is that all children who contract COVID at some point go to school. So I think the jury's out on that one. But I'm very confident that our heads, our schools and our governors are doing everything they can to make their children as safe as possible.
Thank you both. Can we move on with question I on this evening's agenda, which is Councillor Abbs to Councillor Arderwater.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Abbs, for your question. As I'm sure you're aware, Highwood Copse School is an academy and it will be managed by Newbury College. While it's unfortunate that solar panels were not installed during the building of Highwood Copse, we as a council are, as you well know, prioritising mitigation of climate change measures on our own estate first. So it would have been ideal, but we are where we are. The panels that were installed on Market Street roof has been replaced by a far more extensive array. The new array will generate a lot more power, over 86,000 kilowatt hours per annum, compared with the previous 8,500 kilowatt hours. So big increase, and accordingly they will provide more carbon reduction than the old installation. The old array will not stay in storage for long. The plan is to reuse it on our Cheveley Roads Depot unit. Thank you, Councillor Abbs.
No, thank you, Mr. Councillor Arder-Walters. Yes, of course, we have an academy scenario, and we have our stated aim is to achieve a carbon zero West Berkshire by 2030. I just think the members of the public, when we're nitpicking around, oh, that one's this and that one's that, whereas the actual net gain to West Berkshire would have been to place the solar where it could have been most effective most quickly. It's great that you're going to reuse it, but it's we still have a brand new bare building, which if it had its solar fitted, excuse my language, had its solar fitted, would have been pretty much a shining example of how close you can get to carbon zero with a new school. We've just missed an opportunity. I just really want to encourage you, and I hope you could agree with me, that we can start to connect some of the departments just a little bit more to get these better outcomes, even if it does mean bending our rule book a little bit to achieve it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Abbs. Again, as obviously we can both agree that that the ideal is always the ideal, and so of course I would have loved a large amount of solar energy to have been installed on Highwood Copse. By the way, that the installation on the council offices, as I referred to, moving to Cheveley, would be far smaller than we could usefully accommodate on Highwood Copse. That's a side issue. But yes, we will seek every opportunity to continue on this agenda. Thank you.
Thank you both. Can we move on then to item E on this evening's agenda, which is Councillor Macro to Councillor Graham Bridgman.
Thank you again, Councillor Macro. Before I give you the latest in relation to care homes, I should make what might appear to be a blindingly obvious comment, that this is a very fast-moving picture, as I hope we all appreciate. Data is changing on daily, if not hourly, basis. And further, as again you all know, it is not this council that is rolling out the vaccination programme. That task falls squarely to the NHS. What we can do is report upon the programme. And the usual route for doing that is at the bi-monthly public local outbreak engagement board meetings. And the next LOEB meeting is on Monday and will be put on YouTube. And the vaccination programme is an agenda item. Indeed, I should say there has been a very recent announcement from the Berkshire West CCG about how the 3 most westerly primary care networks will be operating a combined vaccination hub at Newbury Racecourse, plus details from the West Reading Villages PCN about the use of Rosewood Hall in Pangbourne as a similar hub. And no doubt there will be a lot more about that on Monday. So, care homes. The latest that I have is that a total of 59 staff have been vaccinated, and that the local surgeries have advised that all the residents and the remaining staff who can be vaccinated, so let me make the point that there will be some staff who are advised not to be vaccinated, underlying health conditions, pregnancy, etc., and some who don't want to be vaccinated. The remainder will be vaccinated, we are told, shortly. No Trees is timetabled for tomorrow. Willows from Monday. And with Walnut, there's a risk assessment being done because there's a COVID positive resident, but they hope, I believe, to do that next week. Birchwood was scheduled for Monday, but I heard, and I'm just thinking it was about 2.5 hours ago, which is how up to date this stuff is, that might slip to the following Monday. So what we know about vaccinations in our care homes tomorrow, next week, and so on, lines up with what we're hearing about vaccinations across the sector generally. The programme is underway. Indeed, I saw that one of the doctors from Newbury was on BBC Breakfast, I think yesterday, confirming what was going on. And we've got it from the CCG that they expect the PCNs to conclude vaccinating care home residents and staff by the end of next week or shortly afterwards. I've already made the point about Berkshire, so it will be shortly afterwards, but hopefully very shortly in the week after. Now that, of course, excludes any care home with an outbreak, because there has to be a whole risk assessment process around those, and they will follow as soon as it can be achieved in such homes.
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Macro?
Thank you, Councillor Bridgewood. So does that mean that as of today, that no residents have yet been vaccinated?
Well, I think there may have been some who are vaccinated at Oxford, but apart from that, in terms of the care home rollout, no, it starts tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can we move on then to item G on our agendas, and that's Councillor Pattenden to Councillor Bowick.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Pattenden. In this financial year, the Education Service provided £30,000 to MENCAP from the Short Breaks for Disabled Children budget to support their after-school club provision. Due to COVID, this could not operate in the normal way, so we agreed flexibility in the way disabled children and their families could be supported. Officers have had regular meetings with MENCAP to discuss how this funding is being used to offer services in the context of the pandemic. Education service funding has been used to support the following charitable organisations during the COVID period to extend their work and activities. MENCAP, as I said, Recovery in Mind, Newbury Community Resource Centre, Parenting Special Children, PACT, Autism Berkshire, PALS, Crossroads, and Swings and Smiles. In partnership with the CCG, we commissioned Kooth, which is a digital platform available to support all young people for mental well-being, Working closely with schools, the service was implemented quickly and was accessible by young people before the school summer holidays began. There's been a good level of take up by young people in the area, which shows that mental wellbeing support is needed and that this method of delivery is effective. Children's services in partnership with the community hub ensured that there was additional support to young carers locally, including a partnership with the YMCA to provide support to this very vulnerable group.
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Pattenden?
Yes, thank you. I wonder if Councillor Berwick, if you can say how much of that is new funding.
Do you mean additional funding spent only during this period, or?
Yep.
Well, the example that I gave of the £30,000 that we gave to MenCap, that is new funding.
Thank you both. Can we move on to item K on this evening's agenda, which is Councillor Abbs to Councillor Arderwater?
Thank you, Leader, and again, thank you, Councillor Abbs, for your question. As you know, we took the difficult decision to postpone the garden waste collection service for a period of 2 weeks, so starting next Monday and resuming again on the 1st of February. This, of course, is due to the entirely unforeseen circumstances of the lockdown and COVID, causing the entirely predictable rise of waste demand at Christmas not to ease away again at this current time. In other words, we would normally expect a large peak of volume post-Christmas, which would have been cleared by the crews. It seems that, again, people are due to being at home more and buying more things and generating more, in particular cardboard. That has not allowed the excess of waste collections to have been dealt with. So again, this is a difficult decision, but we are strongly of the view it's the right one. And our officers are very confident that by diverting more collection crews onto the cardboard and recycling work, that they will be able to clear the backlog and resume normal service in early February. Because also this time of year there is little garden waste being generated, plants are not growing a lot, we are very happy to be able to offer residents on resumption of the service that an additional 3 bags of garden waste as well as the green bin will be cleared. So in reality, the service is being suspended and all that garden waste will be cleared on the first collection after the 1st of February. So given all these factors, we will not be refunding the pro rata equivalent of the garden waste subscription to residents, as well as the factors I've mentioned. The diversion of officer time and money towards working out and calculating and administrating payments would really not be worthwhile and would not be helpful for the residents of the district. Thank you, Councillor Abbs. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm really pleased to see that you're doing something and it's not just a matter of, I think the only supplementary bit is you mentioned supplementary bags. Is there a limit that the public should be aware of? You know, how do we measure what extra will be taken? Is it?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Abbs. Again, the guidance is that 3 additional bags on top of a full bin will be collected. And as with in normal times, at the crew's ability and discretion, additional waste can be taken. But again, on this occasion, we will allow 3 extra bags to be collected.
Okay, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. And then we move to question H, which is Councillor Pattenden to Councillor Berwick.
Thank you, Councillor Pattenden. First of all, I'm going to tell you about some work that we've done at West Berkshire to improve schools' capacity to respond speedily to the new reality of remote learning. We've rolled out a remote access gateway for schools that participate in the IT systems that we provide, so that members of staff, their staff, can access school-based network schools services from home. This allows them to access their own digital resources that remain stored on school-based servers. Now, the background to this is that although much of schools' networking has migrated to the cloud, there still remains years and years of teachers' resources that is on their servers in schools. So while they're at home, they're able to access those data so that they can then prepare the new remote learning lessons that they're having to work on. The Department for Education set out their expectations of remote learning in a letter to schools in December, 15th of December. And from the 25th of January, all schools will publish their remote learning plans. And it will be possible for you, Councillor, for anybody to has access to view each of the learning plans individually. We're in a fast-moving scenario here where schools have very rapidly had to improve their remote learning capacity, and they are at varying levels of readiness. But what we know so far is that secondary schools are offering lessons that have been recorded by staff, and some they're offering face-to-face. And this is mixed in with learning from programs of work and independent study. We've provided over 300 additional laptops for disadvantaged children as a result of our own initiative, and also the DFE's laptop scheme. And we have spent extra money on that. The DFE allocation of laptops is being extended to all those who need them. And while this will depend on national needs, we expect the rollout of laptops to schools to continue. Staff in-service training has been supported, including updates of IT user and data protection policies. And since last March, the School Improvements Team has worked with all schools to develop the remote learning provision that I spoke about earlier on. Mutual support between schools and networking between schools is at a very high level.
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Pattenden?
I do, thank you. So, given all of that, Councillor Berwick, are you sure then that all children working from home have got everything they need to continue with their education? I've seen feedback that children are having to share devices, and that's obviously going to significantly compromise their education. So, yes, I think we need to know that you're confident that all children working from home have got everything they need.
I'm sure, Councillor Pattenden, that not all children have everything they need. We started from a situation before this lockdown where many of our children did not have laptops. Indeed, even if some of our children have laptops, even where children have laptops, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's easy for them to participate in remote learning. There are factors beyond our control, such as having access to a quiet space that we really can't address. What's happened? The way that the DFE funded allocation laptop provision works is that the DFE allocated laptops, availability of laptops, which required the schools to cool them down. All schools, all of our schools, have drawn on their allocation. Not necessarily all of their allocation, but certainly all of them have cooled down laptops. What we're sure about is that total allocation at the moment will not meet the demand. The demand is so high that the government has had to prioritize the delivery of the laptops, and they've started with secondary schools. And as of last week, all laptops cooled down by secondary schools should have been delivered. The government has then moved on to prioritise primary schools according to level of deprivation. So areas which are highly deprived, they're getting the laptops first. So we're going to be quite a way down the list. What we're assured is that by the end of this month, all the laptops will have been delivered. That still won't fix the problem. There will still be some children who need a laptop, or they may need networking devices, for example. And I'm absolutely delighted with the offer that we've had from Greenham Trust. They've set up a fund of £250,000 to buy laptops to get us close, Councillor Pattenden, to every child having the IT systems they need.
Thank you both. Very comprehensive answer there, but very reassuring to know. Thank you, Councillor Bowick. Can we move on then to item J, which is the last question on our agenda this evening, and it's Councillor Pattenden to Councillor Bowick.
Yes, thank you for your question, Councillor Pattenden. You know, you and I should meet more often. You've asked me a very important question. Few of us can have missed the current publicity about plainly substandard food parcels sent to children at home who are entitled to free school meals. Images posted online on Monday quickly became widely shared by mainstream media yesterday. And I asked our education service to brief me on the situation here in West Berkshire. I think we can agree that all our children at home and at school need and deserve good, wholesome food that is both nutritious and enough. And I wanted to be sure that this is what they are being given. I think we all understand that schools and their catering contractors had to mobilise quickly following the announcement on Monday, the 4th of January, that schools would move to remote learning for the majority of children the following day. That's just over a week ago. Today, for children at home who are entitled to free meals, schools are either providing vouchers to their parents or carers or sending meal parcels to their homes. In overseeing their contractors who do this for them, schools have been keen to ensure these meals are fit for purpose. They have reviewed the contents and challenged appropriately when necessary. Where the schools are prepared in school kitchens, here too, these reviews have been carried out. Heads are also listening to and addressing any parental concerns that arise. To check this myself, I have been speaking to schools and I have been reassured that heads are content with their arrangements. I trust them to hold contractors to account and to ensure that quality is maintained. It is clear, though, that schools are facing considerable challenges in providing meals for children at home. Heads of schools who have arranged their own vouchers want to move to the Department for Education voucher scheme that is soon to be relaunched. Other heads want to move from meal parcels to the DFE scheme as soon as they can. And West Berkshire has responded to that demand by offering all schools access to our voucher scheme. Over Christmas, Council issued 3,600 vouchers and bought a similar number ahead of the half term in February. So we are ready to go and we can give schools a workable solution that they can use until the DFE's national scheme is up and running. Ours is the same scheme that we will use to deliver the planned holiday activity and food programme at Easter. I have every confidence that schools working in partnership with the contractors and council will continue to ensure that no child entitled to a free school meal will be without one while learning at home, just as all children who are in school will continue to have access to their usual standard lunch. This term, there are many more children in school than during the first lockdown, in some cases 4 times as many. Teachers have to provide remote learning, teach children in school, and make sure that health and safety and hygiene protocols are observed. I spoke about that earlier on. While some of their colleagues are absent due to illness or self-isolation, the strain on them, and especially their heads, is huge. And now they're doing their absolute best to make sure their most vulnerable children receive the meals they deserve. I have spoken to a head who told me that he and his teachers have inspected the quality of food parcels personally and delivered them to children themselves. On this point, my trust in our heads is unshakable. I hope that I have answered your question, Councillor Pattenden, and I hope I have given you some assurance that here in West Berkshire, we take good care of all our children, especially during this difficult time. I have seen no evidence that, as your leader yesterday complained, parcels sent out to families across Newbury and beyond are woefully inadequate. If Councillor Dillon can show me that this is happening, I will happily investigate personally. Otherwise, my advice to him is to beware believing his own propaganda.
Thank you, Councillor Bowick, for that thorough answer and reassurance. I think that's a very topic that everybody will want to hear our response on. So thank you for that. Councillor Pattenden, do you have a supplementary for Councillor Bowick?
Yes, I do. Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Bowick. That is a comprehensive answer, and I welcome your response. Given the strength of feeling that there's been about the disgraceful food parcels that have been publicised this week and the impact that that has on children, I thought it would be useful to give you the opportunity to clarify the council's position.
Thank you, and I'm grateful for the opportunity, Councillor. And I meant what I said at the top of my reply. You and I should meet more often. We should discuss these sorts of challenges at your convenience. But I would urge you to be clear about one thing. The publicity that we've seen, the national publicity we've seen about the appalling standard of parcels that have been sent to our most disadvantaged children is not what we're seeing here in West Berkshire. There's absolutely no evidence of nothing but high quality, adequate, nutritious food going to our children. And where we're not doing that, or where schools are not doing that, families are getting the vouchers that they need.
Thank you both, and thank you all members for submitting your questions. We've managed to get through them all within the hour, so that's a plus. We can now move on to item 9 on the agenda this evening, which is the exclusion of press and public. I need to ask members to agree by raising their actual hand that the press and the public leave the room in accordance with Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. So can I see a show of hands if we're happy for the press and public to be excluded? And can I remind everybody that we will wait until the live streaming is confirmed to have stopped before we enter into item 10 on our agenda this evening. So I'm just waiting for assurance from the clerk that all of our attendees are members of council as opposed to members of public, and that the live stream has stopped.